Okay, hello everyone. So let's start off with week 3 assignments by looking at the week 3 schedule. So you can see here we need to complete all readings of week 3 readings folder, watch all lectures and videos in week 3 video folder, nothing surprising there. What makes this week a little bit different is please note that you actually have assignments that are due by Tuesday. Right? There's assignments that are due by Tuesday, not simply by Sunday as usual. The oral history project proposal and the podcast preparation template. Why do I have assignments due Tuesday? Because you'll see there is a oral history transcript and a podcast assignment. And in order for you to complete those assignments, you need to do some preliminary work, kind of tell me about what your idea for those assignments is going to be. I will grade those really quickly, right? You'll turn those in on Tuesday. I will get you feedback and grade them by Wednesday, giving you time then to follow through and finish the oral history project or oral history transcript and podcast assignments. So that's something to keep in mind. And then there's usual assignments due Sunday: response paper 3, discussion board post, the web scavenger hunt, the Blackboard quiz, museum project report 2, museum secondary sources report, the oral history transcript, and the podcast. So let's go look through those a little bit more closely. So if we look at the assignments, there's a good number of assignments, right? There's the oral history project proposal. Let's have a look at that. So for this assignment, you will pretend that you have been hired to conduct an oral history project of your own design, and you have a whole year to do it. So you got a lot of time to do this, right? This is just a plan. You'll describe what sort of oral history project you want to undertake, why you think that particular project is important, and what your desired outcome for that project be. You know, is it going to be a digital archive, a book? What will it be? What sorts of expenses your project would incur? You don't have to give me exact dollar amounts, but it's kind of like, you know, we'll need to hire people to do X, Y, and Z. How you'll make contact with interviewees and convince them to sit for an interview with you. You know, that's not easy to do. And what sort of legal and ethical questions you should consider. For help answering these questions, please see Chapter 2 of Doing Oral History. Your paper should be at least 400 words in length. So I think that should be kind of an interesting assignment. For the podcast preparation template, this asks you some simple questions about how to make a podcast. You know, what will your topic be? How is it relevant to your museum project? Those things have to be connected. What is the big idea you're trying to impart through your podcast? You know, whenever you make a presentation, you should have like a big idea, especially if it's a short one. Like your podcast is only a few minutes long, so that's only really enough time for one big idea. What hook will you use at the beginning to help you impart your big idea? One thing to think about too, now there's just so many options that people can pursue for entertainment. So if you don't get someone's interest in the first few seconds, they're just going to leave and pick something else. So how are you going to do that? How you greet your audience, and then you need to provide a script of your podcast, right? It should be about 800 to 1,000 words in length. That's because about that many words takes about 5 to 7 minutes if you read it at a normal rate. So you do need to actually write it out, and you will read it, and you have to practice reading it so that you read it properly so it's interesting, right? Now, one thing I want to point out, just because that can be kind of overwhelming, to develop this assignment, I actually made my own podcast, and I have like a link where I kind of share it with you. But I filled out this form myself, so you can get a sense of how it might look. And this is kind of what I'm expecting people to do. And there you can see my actual podcast where I wrote out the script, and that took about 6 or 7 minutes to read. So going back, you can see that we have the template that is available for you to do, and then the filled in one. We have the third response paper. We have the museum project report. So that's continuing your museum work. So for that one, you're going to give a brief exhibit of your exhibit. Brief description of your exhibit. The thesis statement of your question. Right, you need to include a clear subject, an action, verb, and answer to the question, so what? So, to make it clear what you're talking about. So people's theses are often weak and don't really say anything, and you can't write a good thesis, or you can't have a good exhibit if you don't have a clear, big idea, and you also need to make clear why would we bother coming to your museum. You need to provide a full description of at least one item, provide a that will be part of your that explains what it is so I can understand it. And then you'll also provide the description of one aimed at visitors. This would be what the visitors would actually see. So that's much shorter. It's only 25 words. So there's one for me, so I understand what you're doing, and there's one for the visitors. You would then explain how the poster you will design will stimulate interest in your exhibit. So you have to have an idea. Explain what elements your grand opening party will include. These are all parts of the museum assignment that we've talked about, like your final project about the museum opening. Those are all elements, and so this is kind of like a rough draft where I kind of can look at it and give you feedback. You will also need to explain how you plan to treat potential actual donors during the opening party to thank them for their donations and to encourage their continued support. You got to keep people happy or they won't keep giving you money. So the museum secondary sources report, that's another thing you have to do. So in this, you will provide, you're going to tell me a scholarly secondary source, such a book or peer-reviewed journal article, not a website. You need to do real historical research for this. You probably won't be able to get access to a book unless you already own it, but you can use the library, especially Academic Search Complete, to find relevant secondary sources that are good. So you have to do that for 2 articles. And then you need to explain to me, and you can see in 2 and 4, what you learned from the source, right? I need to see that you actually learned something. You can't make a good museum exhibit unless you actually know something, right? You can't teach about something well unless you actually understand what you're talking about. Here's the oral history transcript assignment. We'll have a quick look at it. This one is pretty simple. Record an interview with someone on a historical event he or she experienced or witnessed that took place in or before the year 1900. Transcribe below a section of at least 250 words. So you're not giving me like the whole thing, just a part of it. And you don't have to it doesn't have to be a continuous part. You can include like the beginning, something from the middle, and then something at the end of your interview if you want. But the key thing is, you need to actually record this and then transcribe it out. And you can find it, a model of this at the StoryCorps website, and I give that one. I think they do a good job of making an interesting but brief oral history project. So the podcast assignment, let's pull that up so you can see what all that entails. So for the podcast assignment, and this is why you have to have that like template that you turn in early to me. You're going to make your own podcast. This assignment has 2 parts. The first part is the podcast preparation template. Okay, I talked about that. I'm going to quickly grade that and get it back to you. And then the actual podcast should be a topic related to your museum exhibit and be between 5 and 7 minutes in length in MP3 format. And it needs to be submitted by the date and time known in the schedule and as described in this video. So this video explains how you can upload a movie onto Echo 360 as a student. It also works for MP3. And so you record in MP3 format and then you upload it and then you email it to me. You'll be graded based on the clarity and cohesion of your recording and narration. So you need to practice your podcast multiple times before recording it to make sure you get it right. And to follow the guidelines in the podcast presentation template. You also be graded on the relevancy to your museum exhibit, the quality of the information, and the interpretation you deliver. In terms of software, I recommend that you use Audacity, and here's a website for a tutorial. Please note that if you want to include music, and I think including music is a good idea, you need to abide by the relevant laws to do that. So there are sources I give you here, Free Music Archive, where you can find free music, but you do need to be careful about the license because some require that you like give them credit, and you can do that at the end of your podcast. You can say, so we got this music from so-and-so. Some do not allow editing, and of course you're not going to be playing the whole song, so you can't use a song that doesn't allow editing because you have to edit the song. You're going to cut off part of it. We do need to make sure that we're respecting people's rights there. So let's get out of that. The next assignment to talk. Okay, so you need to email me a link to your podcast. This video tells you how to upload and share a file in Echo 360. I gave the same link in the podcast assignment, so you shouldn't have any trouble with that. So let's go to the response paper. Oops. I didn't do that properly. Let's go to... Oh, it's because I did not... Aha, we had this happen again. So I did not upload the actual assignment. Brilliant. So let me do that. You can see how Blackboard works from my end there. All right, now let's do it. So response paper 3, you'll notice that answers the following questions based on oral historian. So there's an article here. What issues need to be dealt with to establish a successful oral history project? Which do you think is most challenging and why? So there's only 2 articles actually, and this one, Doing Oral History Chapter 2, that's a really long chapter. You actually only need to skim it, right? This one you need to read really closely. There's a bunch of questions. This one, it's really simple. I just want you to kind of skim it, get a basic idea of what's going on there. Then there is a series of how to do an oral history podcast series. It's very nice. I like it. Several videos. They're each short. Then there's some examples of oral histories. So one is the Monoghan Cotton Mills oral history video where they showed people interviewing cotton mill workers, which I think is very interesting. Kind of summarize what they talk about. Pay attention to some of the funny events. There's an incident with an outhouse, which I think is disgusting, but also somewhat humorous. Then there's 3 more short videos that give examples of how to do oral history. Germans in the Woods, 1st Squad, 3rd Platoon, and J.T. Johnson and Al Lingo. So you want to summarize in your own words what purposes each one of these had. There's then a lecture I give where I talk about what a podcast is, why you would want to have it, and so forth. You just listen to the lecture, answer the questions. You would then listen to my podcast. Remember, I made one myself so you could see what I'm looking for. And, I can't really design an assignment unless I actually have done it. So you do it that way. You would listen to my podcast, get an idea for how what I'm kind of expecting, then answer the questions. That gives you a better understanding of podcasts. Also make sure that you actually listen to it. And then the last question gives you the option to choose from several different podcasting channels. Oops, forgot the quotation marks there. And some of these are long, some of these are short. I would encourage you to listen to the whole episode, but at least listen for 15 minutes, right? So at least listen to 15 minutes of one of these episodes. Revolutions is interesting. It's about a bunch of different revolutions. So it includes the American Revolution, French Revolution, communist revolutions, English Revolution, Haitian Revolution, lots of cool stuff there. History of Japan and China History podcast, I think are pretty obvious what they're about. Those are channels, so you could choose any episode from that. I also have, and I have links to this in the relevant folder, there are 3 other podcasts, episodes, not just channels, but actual episodes. One is called History Comes Alive. Another is Black Public History. And then Poe Belongs to Baltimore, Baltimore to Poe. So you can kind of decide based on those which one you want to do. So you can choose whichever one. I just wanted to give you like a big sample to choose from. And then just answer these 5 points. It's just to help you think a little bit more deeply about how to make a good podcast. So let's go back here. There's not a whole lot else to say. There's the videos, there's the readings that should actually be up here. Then there's the quizzes, the link for the web scavenger hunt. So you've got everything there. As always, if you have any questions, please do let me know.